بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. So we are in Surah Yusuf, and actually, while we're doing this, let's get up on the screen. Just bear with me a minute. Okay, we're in ayah number 58 in Surah Yusuf. Of course, we've been talking about this as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it ahsanul qasas, the best of stories, and deriving some lessons from these different events that took place in the life of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. And subhanAllah, there's so much relevance even today, literally thousands of years later. The human condition, human beings are human beings, and the emotions that we have, the situations that we get ourselves into, the temptations that we fall to, those things remain constant. The form in which they take, may change. The technology advances, the morality decreases, these different things happen, but the essence of who the human being is the same. And that's why, subhanAllah, the Quranic story is always relevant, is always applicable, because it doesn't matter how long these things took place, how long ago these things took place, because we are who we are. It's important that we always it's important that we understand that the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He presented these stories and the lessons that He imbued in the Quranic stories are part of the miracle of the Quran is that these things are always applicable, right? They didn't just apply to one time, and that's the beauty of the message. A lot of people, a lot of things now, it's really interesting, right? If you talk about certain, I was just, I was with some brothers the other day, and we were talking about, it's only young guys on this call, so I'll share this. I was talking with these guys. They were doing, we were doing this podcast, and they were talking about pornography, and they were showing me some books that they use. These are Muslim guys who, to kind of understand the latest trends amongst in the world of pornography, and what trends in terms of understanding it for the purpose of escaping it. People who are addicted to porn and stuff like that. And so they showed me these about 4 different books, and they say, this book is written 10 years ago, or it's already outdated. This book was written 5 years ago, and some of the things there are already they don't apply anymore in terms of the way in which they talk, because the technology has changed and all of these things. So again, like I said, what do you call it? Sorry, I got distracted. Again, the Quranic presentation is so beautiful and so clean that it's always applicable. So starting from ayah number 58, we'll read a few ayahs and then go over the tafsir of it. So we have volunteers today to read? Anybody?
I can try that, inshallah.
From 58 to 62.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجاء إخوة يوسف فدخلوا عليه فعرفهم وهم له منكرون ولما جاءهم بجهازهم قال ائتوني بأخ لكم من أبيكم ألا ترون أني أوفي الكيل وأنا خير المنزلين فإن لم تأتوني به فلا كيل لكم عندي ولا تقربون قالوا سنراود عنه أباه وإنا لفاعلون وقال لفتيان وقال لفتيانه اجعلوا بضاعتهم في رحالهم لعلهم يرجعونها
لعلهم
لعلهم يعرفونها إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم لعلهم يرجعون.
جزاك الله خير. طيب بسم الله. So
Can I ask you a question before you jump into those
yeah, of
verses?
course, of course.
Sorry, we were not able to participate in the last session,
Yeah.
and we were all going back and watching the video. But there was one point I wanted to ask about in verse 52. You were speaking about in the last session about how it could potentially be from Zulaykha or from Prophet
Yeah.
Yusuf alayhi salam. And I was just wanting to understand a little bit more about nafs ammara bis-su.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of what we
Yeah.
understand about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good question. So nafsul ammara bisu. This is the soul that provokes, prompts, pushes a person to do evil things. And so this is what is meant by this nafs, or what this nafs is the base desires that people have. There is this people who don't have any checks or controls or any sense of morality, and who have pushed any sense of teaching, dignified teaching as it relates to what is right and what is wrong, and they don't care or about any of that. This is that person. I'll describe it more. Or even the believer, if he is, or if he or she is to just get so lazy in their practice and get so lax in their practice, these inclinations are underlying in every person to a certain extent, right? And the more of a the more the environment around them is been corrupted, has been spoiled, right? The more by the way, Zu, do we need to record this, or
Yes, we should.
it doesn't record automatically?
If you see like a red button somewhere on your screen, it's recording automatically.
On the participants, it says there's a red dot, but I don't know other than that. So it's recording automatically because it says pause or stop recording.
Yeah,
it doesn't give me that. Okay. So this is, this underlying reality that is, the more corrupt a society is, right? The more that somebody surrounds them with friends that are just involved in haram things, the more it brings out from the self these evil inclinations. So what does that mean? That means somebody who, when it comes, for example, to money, they are willing to do whatever it takes to get at that money, right? There's this greed inside of them, and I'm going to get my hands on money no matter what it takes, right? So even if that means some evil means, it means some, to rob and to steal and to take what's not, what doesn't belong to oneself. That's in that. in that evil soul. It will tell you that, you know, you need to get your hands on that, no matter how that happens. As it relates to the sex drive, somebody who has no control, no sense of like what is right and wrong, and even somebody who, so this is, like I said, even somebody who has a sense of right and wrong, but they get caught up, that voice overpowers them, that internal voice of, you know, oh, you have an opportunity, here you go. And you know, that it's that internal inclination based desire. So this is the thing, right? As as you know, as our Prophet ﷺ, he told us that kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitra. Every newborn is born upon fitra, is born upon natural good, upon that which is good. So we have this innate goodness. We have this innate goodness that you know, we don't believe that human beings are created evil. Like some others, we believe that we're created good. However, that goodness can be corrupted when a person lives in a corrupt environment, when they allowed themselves to stray far away from godly teachings, and then that internal self that pushes, because as human beings are animals. At the end of the day, we're, you know, and if we don't use the intellect to control certain animal instincts within us, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he calls some people bal hum kal an'ami bal hum adal. Those people, you know, who don't use their lahum آذان لا يسمعون بها ولهم أعين لا يبصرون بها. You know, they have ears, but they don't hear with them. They have eyes, but they don't see with them. In other words, they don't use them in the way in which a human being should be using them. But they use them the way animals do, which is just to fulfill instincts, right? Of instincts of what? To eat, drink, and have sex. And then human beings, one more on top of that, to gather wealth. Right, and so if somebody doesn't have a check on any of that stuff, that's what is a nafsul ammara bisu. And again, like I said, you know, the more somebody surrounds themselves with that sort of reality, the more they bring out that negative reality within themselves. And you know, like if you look at like the music industry, you look at you know, you look at I don't know, you know, what did I say? The music industry, the movie industry, even, where there's no checks in anything that they say or that they do, and somebody ingests that day and night, and that's who you become, right? And you're basically exciting your nafs, you're detracting your nafs from that which is good and straying towards all that is evil. And that's a nafs al-ammara bis-su. All right. Bismillah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's talking now in this section about, let's put everything back in context, right? Yusuf alayhi salam, he's now a ruler over the land. He's not the head ruler, so to speak, not the president, not the king, but he's one of the ministers, right? He has authority, and he oversees, as we mentioned last time, the treasury, the storehouses of this particular kingdom. And if you remember, the king had a dream, and in this dream he saw that there were going to be 7 prosperous years and then 7 years of drought. That's how Yusuf interpreted the dream. And in those 7 years of prosperity, Yusuf's plan, alayhi salam, which he now had the authority to implement, was to take the excess, the surplus of the crops, and to store them, to store the grains, because there would be coming up 7 hard years. SubhanAllah, this is from the genius of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. Because if there's surplus, okay, you eat it. What's the, why do you save it? But Yusuf alayhi salam, from his wisdom that's given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he actually comes up with this plan to save it. That time has now come. And that's the context of why his brothers show up to Egypt. The family of Yusuf is from Palestine. Yusuf alayhi salam is in Egypt. They are neighboring countries, neighboring lands, but there's depending upon where his family was in Palestine and depending upon where Yusuf was in Egypt, that could have been a distance of some hundreds of miles. It could have been less, but if you look at if where Yusuf was in, say, modern day Cairo, and to the border of Palestine, that's hundreds of miles, right? I don't know exactly how much, but maybe somebody can look it up, 300, 400, 500 miles, something like that. So his family has traveled this distance. They've traveled this distance. Why? Because the drought has come. The famine has struck. There's no food. There's, in those days, there's no, there's the world market, excuse me, is not connected to the same point, meaning you don't get bananas that come to you from South America, and then the season in South America ends, and then those bananas come from some other part of the world where they're in season, and it's a constant availability because the world market, the world trade is so fluid. No, it's much more regional because you can't transport goods to that distance, especially perishable goods and so forth, foods. So famine has now struck. So his family from Palestine is suffering from the what do you call it? The famine, just like they are in Egypt and in some of the neighboring lands. So they hear about Yusuf alayhi salam in Egypt, how he has how he is helping those who are in need, and that there is food for purchase, but not at an inflated price, right? What happens when there's an excess of demand and there's a decrease in supply? The prices go up, and those that control various industries, they'll mark the price way up. Why? Because they can. And but Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't do that. The foodstuffs that he was giving out to people, he sold them at their base price, right? And so they hear of that, and they're coming to the land. They're coming to that land to access that food that they need because they don't have it. They have run out, or they're running out in their homeland. So subhanAllah, the story is very connected, right? This is not mentioned here, but this is understood from the context of, So now we're talking about how many years later? Probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years later from the last scene, right? When Yusuf alayhi salam, he meets the king, right? And he's now employed by the king, because there are 7 prosperous years that were going to be ahead of them, and now they're into those next 7 years of drought. So the translation reads, and the brothers of Yusuf came seeking food, and they entered upon him. He recognized them, but he was to them unknown, right? فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Yusuf alayhi salam, he knew who they were and they didn't know who he was. Why do you think that is? Anybody?
Because it's been so many years and they don't recognize him.
But he recognized them in
It's
so many years.
probably it's probably
And
because
by this time, sorry, before, and by this time, it's been since he's seen his brothers, right? So I was saying it's been 7, 8, 9, 10 years from the last scene that we were talking about in the Quran. But it's from the last time that he's seen his brothers, it has been probably in the range of anywhere from Allah knows 15 to 30 years. We can't discern exactly, but if you take the time that he was in prison, if you take the time, if you take the 7 times of prosperous years, the 7 prosperous years, you take the time that he was in prison, which was also several years, and then you take the time that he served in the Aziz's house. So add all of that together, talking likely 20-ish years, right? So why does he recognize them and they don't recognize him? Shabir, you were saying something?
oh yeah, because when the last time they met or they saw each other, Yusuf was like a kid, and his brothers were a lot older, right? So like the facial features, I guess, are very similar to his brother, for his brothers, but like for him, he probably like had like a total like change and stuff, and they were able to recognize him.
MashaAllah. If I didn't know you were a kinesiology major, I think you were a psychology major, man. Good stuff. Exactly, right? There's a lot of change that takes place at that time of life when Yusuf alayhi salam, when he left his family, but his brothers were already older, and so they still look the same to a certain extent. Very good. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ, and when he had furnished them with their supplies, right? When they were given the food that they came to get, Yusuf alayhi salam, he tells them, bring me a brother of yours from your father. So it kind of jumps a little bit, right? Some of the in one of the scholars who talked about the Quran, his name is As-Suddi. He says he fills in this gap, and he says there is a conversation, that Yusuf alayhi salam, he engages in with his brothers, and it goes like this: that when they came to receive those foodstuffs that Yusuf was handing out, and Yusuf, by the way, he's the minister, but still he's on the front lines. That shows his leadership, right? He's a leader of the people. He's on the front lines, distributing food. He could have been in his, up high in his office or somewhere, but he's involved, which shows about who he is and how a leader should be, right? How a leader should be with the people. So he asked them, he says, what brings you to this land, or what brings you to my land? And he knows who they are, and they don't know who he is. And they say, oh, Aziz, we came because, we're suffering from drought, and we came to get some food. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he says to them, he says, maybe you guys are spies, you're in this land coming to us. Now realize, these are 10 brothers. There's an impression that a family of 10 men, all of them brothers, there's a strength in that, right? That can be very imposing. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he says to them, maybe you guys are spies. They say, Ma'ad Allah, no, God forbid. Then Yusuf says, so then who are you? They say, we are from the land of Canaan, Palestine. and our father is Yaqub, he is a prophet of God. And Yusuf asked them, and does he have other sons other than you? Right? He's leading them on. He knows, Yusuf knows. And they say, yes, we used to be 12. We used to be 12. The youngest one, the youngest one, he died many years ago, and back home. We're talking about Yusuf, and he was the most beloved to our father, and his shaqiq is left. In the Arabic language, they distinguish between the way a full brother and a half brother. A full brother is called shaqiq. You know what I mean by that, full brother and half brother. So if you have the same mother, same father, it's a full brother. If you have same mother and different fathers, then it's a half brother, right? So Yusuf, there are 12 altogether. 10 are from one mother, 2 are from the other mother. So Benjamin, who is his only full brother, all the rest are half brothers. They say, the other brothers, they say, that Yusuf was the most beloved to our father, and his other full brother, he's still also alive. And they say that Yaqub, their father, he kept him back with him back home, and he stayed behind. And then Yusuf alayhi salam, he tells them to come and stay, and he gives them food and is generous to them, right? So that's kind of what has happened in between here. And so then, based on that, Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, after he gives them what he has given them, and perhaps he has been generous to them, perhaps they have had a meal. We don't know all of those details, but there are some other things that have transpired, right? The Quranic story just goes to the main points. He says, bring me a brother of yours from your father. He knows that they have another brother because they told him, right? Don't you see that I give full measure and that I am the best of accommodators? If you come with this other brother, I'm going to take care of you guys, just like I took care of you this time. And I am, I'm the best host, as you have seen. وَأَنَا خَيْرُ الْمُنزِلِينَ. I'm the best host. And I will, be generous. So don't worry. So what happens? Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, فَإِن لَمْ تَأْتُونِي بِهِ فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي وَلَا تَقْرَبُونَ. And if you do not bring him to me, no measure will be for you from me. From this point on, I'm not going to give you any more, product, no more food, and you cannot have this level of, of being honored by me as I did. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he took care of them. When I say took care of them, meaning he treated them with more respect and more honor, and entertained them in a way that he didn't do with other people who came from other parts of Egypt and perhaps the neighboring lands to get their own food supply. But he treated them differently. He treated them special. And he says, if you don't bring your brother the next time, then you have nothing, and you're not going to come. So look at these two ayahs, very interesting, right? Look at ayah number, what do you call it? Ayah number, this tab is in the way, here we go. Ayah number 59 and ayah number 60, right? Ayah number 59, look how he talks to them, and then look how he talks to them in ayah number 60. Yusuf alayhi salam in ayah number 59, bring your brother, don't you see that I'm generous and that I'm the best host? So what is he doing? He's encouraging them in a positive way, right? by telling him the the positive realities. But in the next ayah, number 60, what happens? But if you don't bring him, then you have nothing, and I'm not going to treat you this way that I did this time, right? So he uses what? He used the carrot and the stick, both. And this is very common in the Quran, this language. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's telling us about the next life, and which is supposed to be a motivator for how we live this life, tells us about Jannah, but then he tells us about Nar. He tells us about the beautiful, gives us beautiful descriptions of paradise, what it looks like, and then gives us the scary descriptions of the hellfire and what it looks like. And this is a sort of a balancing out in terms of being motivating. Some people are more motivated by candy, and some people are more motivated by, like, you can't play no more PS5, man, if you keep doing that stuff, right? Some kids you deal with them by telling them, I'll buy you this and this, and sometimes if you don't do this, then this is what's going to happen. And the best way is in the balance of that. And so Yusuf, he does that with his brothers. In Arabic, this is called at-targhib wa tarhib. At-targhib wa tarhib. One is encouraging somebody to do things by presenting a positive sort of way, and the other is scaring somebody by telling them the negative consequences of what their actions are or what might happen. So anyways, that's so it's very it's a very interesting that Yusuf uses that approach, but he has that authority to do that, right? And he extends that. So let's see, and then he says, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they said, we will attempt to dissuade our father from keeping him, and indeed we will do it. In other words, our father did not allow, he didn't want us to bring Benjamin this time, but we're going to try to, we'll talk to him when we go back, and we'll try to come back, right? So what happens? Yusuf alayhi salam, he tells his servants, the people that work for him, put their merchandise in their saddlebags. So when Yusuf's brothers came, they bought the food, they bought the grains that they took back with them. Each brother was given one camel load of food. And so that's a lot, right? One camel load. And they paid for it. The brothers, they paid for it. Didn't come free, but they paid the very base minimum price which Yusuf was selling this product for. And so Yusuf, he tells his servants, that money that they gave us to buy the food, put it back in their load. Remember, they went back with their loads filled with all of this grains, that they had purchased. So put that money, put it back in their bags without them knowing, right? And it's heavy, so they didn't recognize, so that they might recognize it when they have gone to their people, and perhaps again they will return. Meaning what? Meaning they're going to go home, they're going to open up their stuff, and they're going to find this money, and they're going to, Yusuf has already given them one reason to come back. If you come back again and you come with your brother, I'll give you more. And he treated them with full respect and so forth. So they know they have like a good standing with this powerful leader, right? So it's that itself is a prompt for them to come back. And just in case they would think maybe of not coming back, well, now Yusuf alayhi salam, he gives them their money back, which they, either they can come back and, oh, they have to give, if they're truthful and honest, they're like going to say, oh, we somehow what we paid, the goods that we paid for, that money ended up back with us, and here we want to give that back. Or that it could mean that now they have enough money to come back a second time, because maybe they exhausted all of their funds the first trip, but now they have enough money to come back for a second trip to buy another load. Make sense? So this is what's this is what Yusuf alayhi salam means by giving them that money, or those that and back then it's they use like silver coins, and it's, so that's why it's called here bida'a. Their merchandise, but it's really the currency that they purchased these goods with. Anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll go to the next section. It's pretty straightforward. We'll go to the next section. This is from 63 to 66, and this section is talking about when their brothers, they get back home, right? When Yusuf's brothers, they get back home, and this interaction that they have with their father. These next few ayahs. Any volunteers to read? Somebody? Anybody? Somebody read? طيب. I'll go ahead and read. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فلما رجعوا إلى أبيهم قالوا يا أبانا منع منا الكيل فأرسل معنا أخانا نكتل وإنا له لحافظون. قال هل آمنكم عليه إلا كما أمنتكم على أخيه من قبل فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. ولما فتحوا متاعهم وجدوا بضاعتهم ردت إليهم قالوا يا أبانا ما نبغي هذه بضاعتنا ردت إلينا ونمير أهلنا ونحفظ أخانا ونزداد كيل بعير ذلك كيل يسير. قال لن أرسله معكم حتى تؤتوني موثقا من الله لتأتونني به إلا أن يحاط بكم. فلما آتوه موثقهم قال الله على ما نقول وكيل. So this section, as we mentioned, is about this exchange of these brothers with their father. And of course, you understand what the tension here is in this discussion, because now they're asking their father to take his youngest son back with them to Egypt. Their father already has a previous negative experience, to say the least. The last time all of the brothers, they said, we want to take our younger brother out with us. Right? He already has this probably traumatic experience of what happened from the last time. And so this is where the tension is in this exchange. And so the translation reads, and when they returned to their father, they said, so now when they went all the way back to Philistine, a few days or maybe a few weeks later, they go to their father and they say, oh, our father, further measure has been denied to us. We could have got more. We could have got even more, brought more food home, more of a load home. So send with us our brother, so that we may, one second, yeah. So send with us our brother so that we may be given more. And indeed, we will be his guardians. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Don't worry, we will take care of him. We will protect him. What happens? What does Sayyidina Yaqub, how does he respond? He says, should I entrust you with him as I entrusted you with his brother before? Should I entrust you with him? You're forcing me to send him with you. And just like I sent to you, Yusuf, the last time, and of course the last time is 2 decades or more ago. And Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, he says, فَاللَّهُ خَيْرٌ حَافِظًا. But Allah is the best guardian, and He is the most merciful of the merciful. What do you read when you read that piece right there? Allah is the best guardian, He is the most merciful. He is وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. What is that? Like, why does He say that there? What is going on? What is the indication? They're asking Him a question. He's telling them, should I do this? And then He says that statement. What do you kind of get out of that? What's the tone? Anybody? A father is being asked something by his children, and now he's deliberating it. What do you read in what he's saying there?
Level of distrust.
Level of distrust. Okay. Anything else? Why would he say? Why would Yaqub alayhi salam say, but Allah is the best guardian and He is the most merciful?
He's putting trust.
Go ahead.
Putting trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and caring for Benjamin as related to the situation that he put his other son Yusuf alayhi salam in prior with these brothers.
Right. Good. So, which means, and there's an indication there that what?
That he is concerned that they will treat him the same way they treated Yusuf.
Yeah. So in other words, so he, at first he's saying, how can I, should I entrust you with him? But then here, as if he's leaning towards actually sending him, right? Here's the first indication. When you talk to your parents, you talk to them, you say, hey, mom and dad, I want to do this. I want to go out with the guys and we're going to do this and that. They say, man, you're not going out with those guys. Those guys are trouble. And then then your parents say, well, I don't know. It's I don't know if I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. But then they give some sort of indication that maybe there's some leeway there, right? They start bending a bit. They say something that makes that. So this is that statement by Sayyidina Yaqub that he's like starting to show that he's like amenable to what they're saying. But even though he's as if he's going to let him go, but he's also saying at the same time, Allah is the best protector. And at the end of the day, he's saying, okay, it looks like I may have to send him, and I'm going to put my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is the most merciful. If Allah wants, for him to be protected, he'll be protected. And then in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and when they opened their baggage, now remember, they came home, they're excited, they tell their father what happened. They still haven't opened up their ride and unloaded, right? And when they open up their what these loads that they've come home with, they find what? They find the currency, they find that which they paid to get this merchandise, this food merchandise that they brought home with them. They found it in their bag. So they say to their father, "Oh, our father, what more could we desire?" Right? This is our merchandise returned to us. This is, what we paid $1,000, or say we paid $100 to buy that food, and look, here's $100 bill back in our goods. And they say, and we will obtain supplies for our family and protect our brother and obtain an increase of a camel's load. They're saying, look, we have what we need to go back and buy more. And we'll take care of our brother, and we'll even get even more. And that is an easy measurement. And what is meant by that is an easy measurement, like the king of Egypt, this minister of Egypt, Yusuf, their brother, who they don't even realize, he's so easy in giving out this product at a very, very fair price, and so it's not very difficult. Or they mean by that it's not very difficult. All we have to do is take our other brother, and we will have even more. Now realize this, Benjamin is older now. He's a grown man. He has his own family. He has his own children. So it's not like he's a little kid anymore, right? This is the other thing in this exchange between Yaqub and his other sons. They're all older now. It's less of a worry. Like, it's not their young boys that he's gonna let. He's a grown man, So let's see. And it also is an indication, right? The other pressing factor here is that they are in need of extra food, right? There is this great food shortage, and there's opportunity to get more. So that is another pressure, so to speak, on Sayyidina Yaqub. And the other thing also is that Yusuf alayhi salam, he was most beloved to Yaqub. Benjamin wasn't necessarily known in that same way, right? Yusuf was a prophet. Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet, and he was a special boy, and it was very apparent, and his father had special love for him. Benjamin, Yaqub wasn't known to have that same relationship with him. So for all of these reasons, right, it was an easy thing to go. But at the same time, look, he says, Allahu khayrun hafidha. Allah is the best protector. He still put his trust in Allah, declaring that how a person always has to, put their trust with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times, in all situations. And then after all that, he still makes them take this oath. It's very interesting, right? The whole scenario. And what does that mean about the Yaqub alayhi salam, his trust with his sons, and the negative, the traumatic experience he had with the fact when they took out Yusuf the last time. So Yaqub alayhi salam, he says, never will I send him with you until you give me a promise by Allah that you will bring him back to me. So he does something more than he did when they took Yusuf the last time. They say, Hatta tu'tuni mawthiqam min Allah. In the Arabic word, there's different words. There's yameen, which is an oath, but then there's mithaq, or here mawthiq. It's an even higher level of, kind of oath, of pledge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, right? That this is like a very clear, undeniable, you swear by Allah that you are going to take care of him, unless you should be surrounded by enemies, unless death comes to you some other way. If that happens, that's by Allah's will. I'm not going to hold you responsible for that, but everything that's in your control, you have full responsibility for. And when the brothers, they give their promise, Yaqub alayhi salam, he says, قال الله على ما نقول وكيل. and Allah is over what we say as a witness, reminding them, right? Allah is the one who's is our protector, and is going to take care of us, and He is aware of this agreement between us. And again, look at every time what Yaqub alayhi salam is always taking it back to Allah, always putting his ultimate trust with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do what you need to do, but then you pray to Allah to put blessing in it, to protect it, to make it happen, to make it the best that it can be. um, um, and and even if something happens, then we understand, that is within Allah's will as well. Any questions?
Yes. Regarding, you mentioned in 64, verse 64, around the idea that the parent, Yaqub alayhi salam, is kind of leaning towards indicating that, he would potentially send Benjamin. And then in 66, is there any lesson in here where regarding like the parent-child communication, the dynamic that occurs? So when you mentioned in 64, I was wondering if there was a connection between that and this.
Yeah. I don't know. Perhaps you see something that I don't, that you can extract from that.
Not necessarily.
To me, yeah, no. I mean, to me, it was just more about, and this is what I mentioned in some of the books of Tafseer, that, you can see. I think maybe one lesson to take from this is how we should always be attentive to words and how people, what people say very closely. A lot of times we get taken by emotion and stuff like that. But if you listen to the words of Sayyidina Yaqub, he's saying, yeah, I'm not, how could I trust you again? But then in the same breath, he's saying that Allah is the best protector, as if he's relegated to having to do this. Okay, well, looks like he's going to have to go. But he didn't say that expressly. Okay, here you go. But he expressed his hesitation. So I think, I think there's a little bit to be learned there about reading people and reading situations and understanding them and finding that opening when dealing with people. But I don't know. I can't think of anything beyond that. طيب, the next section is now Yaqub alayhi salam in this ayah is telling his sons, giving them advice, so giving them approval, and then after that, the first, وَلَمَّا دَخَلُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمْ أَبُوهُمْ, and then how they approached into Egypt, just that first moment. And so there's some nice lessons in these couple of verses. Any readers?
Come on, man. Come on, guys. Step up. Read.
It's only y'all on this phone call, man. No aunties, and ain't no, nobody else. Somebody? Nobody?
Is it verse 67?
67. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقال يا بني لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة وما أغني عنكم من الله من شيء
من شيء
من شيء إن الحكم إن الحكم إلا لله عليه توكلت وعليه فليتوكل المتوكلون.
The next ayah.
ولما دخلوا من حيث
ولما دخلوا
وأمرهم أبوهم ما كان يغني عنهم من الله من شيء إلا حاجة في نفس يعقوب قضاها
قضاها
قضاها وإنه لذو علم لما علمناه ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون.
جزاكم الله خير. Good stuff. Inshallah. Thank you. Shabir. All right. Bismillah. So here the approval of the father, right? But he tells them to approach this matter in a certain way. And this is interesting. There's some lessons here. So he says, Yaqub alayhi salam, he says, "Oh my sons," so he's given approval, right? Fine. Take Benjamin and go again. This is what's understood. "O my sons, do not enter from one gate, but enter from different gates. And I cannot avail you against the decree of Allah at all." What does that mean? Why does he tell them that? Why does he tell them to go from different gates? I gave some indications of some things earlier. And what does it mean? Enter from different gates, and I cannot avail you against the decree of Allah at all. Yes, I don't mind. Yes. Think about it for a minute. Think about the whole situation and the whole scenario. Two questions. Why does he tell them to go into from different gates? And then why does he say, I can't help you, against the decree of Allah? Anybody take a crack at it, man.
Don't go the same way you came. Take a different path. Even to when you enter in, entering through different doors, meaning just go through a different path in versus where you came from.
Okay, if that's what it means, then what's the purpose of that?
I don't know.
Anybody? Any other guesses?
Easier to split up.
For what reason?
Now it's just like being cautious.
Good. For what reason? Very good. For what reason?
Because it's kind of like suspicious to how they just want him or like his brother. So I think like if they split up and go through different gates, like no one would know, right? I feel like it's like under the radar, like going into like the city.
Yes, very good. I mean, so you hit on some of it, and then but I'll tell you but then what the crux of all of that. Good like deductions should be. So yeah, that split up, go into different doors, go under the radar. Don't be seen in, don't make yourself visible. Why? Remember, there are 10 brothers. 10 brothers. They are, they're, you see them, they make an impression. And Sayyidina Yaqub is go into the city. Back then, cities, by the way, they're not open realities. There's a lot of open land between different civilizations, different cities, and the city is walled up. It has walls all the way around it. Not anybody can come in at any time. And it's walled up for two reasons. Number one, because of wild beasts, right? And number two, because of human enemies that may come in and attack. So these are walled up cities. And I've seen these places. I don't know if any of you, other parts of the world, I've seen these sort of, I've seen this in Egypt itself, in Cairo. There's still some of the old walls that are exposed, and it gives you a sense of how big the city was at that time, and how life was at that time. And I've seen those in other parts of the world too. These large metropolitan cities of today, once upon a time, they were a little bit smaller, but they were enclosed, right? And therefore, and just like you look watching the old movies, that's how it was. So anyways, and there were four gates, it said, for the city that Yusuf was in. And the heart of Egypt at that time. And so he tells them, split up, right? A couple of you go here, a couple of you go there. The main reason being that so there would not be any jealousy that would befall them. There would not be any, as in the Islamic terminology is called ayn, hasad, so that people would not make hasad of them as they're coming into the land. This is the type of concern that Sayyidina Yaqub has for his sons. They're going to this foreign land. He doesn't want he doesn't want harm to his youngest son, but in this particular case, it's really talking about, don't bring attention to yourselves. And this is really important, this concept of not bringing attention to yourselves unnecessarily. We live in a society now that is all about bringing attention to yourself. It's completely about bringing attention to yourself, flashing the light on yourself, creating different profiles on different platforms for the purpose of people seeing you, people knowing you, being somebody. And that's dangerous for multiple reasons. Number one, at the underlying this sort of reality today, wanting to be seen, posting your picture everywhere, opening up all these different social media platforms so that people can know you, is problematic, because it's it's about trying to gain fame, even if somebody may not see it that way, but that might be what's the underlying. And that's when we talked about before earlier, an-nafsul ammara bis-su, the nafs that prompts itself to do evil, that's feeding into that voice that internally says, yeah, I want people to know me. I need to have as many friends as possible and as many likes as possible, as many views as possible. That becomes a disease, right? That becomes a disease. Unfortunately, it's a widespread disease in the world in which we live in today. But that's something we have to be really conscious of and careful of. Secondly, there's no problem with just flying under the radar, doing your thing, being the best person that you can be, benefiting those around you, being a good person, being beneficial to those that are closest to your family, your parents, and so on, and not being being concerned about what the rest of the world thinks about you, and trying to make a name for yourself and putting yourself out there in all of these different ways. That's not from our way. That's again, all of these different new world realities have exploited that, but that's not our way. The second thing is that hasad is real. For people to be jealous, and that to have a negative effect upon us, that's a real thing. It it is a as our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Al-ainu haqq," that the evil eye is truth. It happens. Negative consequence can come out of that, and it can simply happen by just looking at someone with eyes of amazement, like, oh wow, look at them. Whoa, man, they got a lot of cars. They got a big house. They have this, they have that, right? That sort of, you know, um, kind of, phenomena is the negative consequence of that on the one on the receiving end is real. A person can be afflicted and affected in a bad way. And so Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, he's telling his sons to be conscious of that, just like we should be conscious of that. Again, another reason not to bring attention to ourselves and there's a lot of dire, negative spiritual consequences of that. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was afflicted by that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would be with his grandsons Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein, he would make dua on them for Allah's protection for them from that. He would say, أعيذكما بكلمات الله التامة من كل شيطان وهامة ومن كل عين لامة. He would say, I ask Allah's protection for you by the words of Allah, His complete and perfect words, from every shaitan and every evil and every evil eye. So, we are concerned with how people see us, and being protected against that. Now, the other thing is, what do we do as Muslims when we see something that does like catch our eye, right? And we say, wow, look at that. As Muslims, we don't just say, wow, look at that, because with those words, the evil eye can be passed on, and a negative consequence can come upon the other party. This is a spiritual reality that we don't claim to have the physical laws of understanding to know how that happens. How is that transmitted? Allahu alam. It's in this metaphysical dimension of reality. It's not in a physical dimension of reality where you can measure it with some sort of scientific formula or measure the data behind that. So what do we do when we do see something that amazes us or attracts us? We say, one time the Prophet ﷺ, he told one of the Sahaba, when that Sahabi saw something that amazed him, he says, Allah barrakt. He says, did you not ask, did you not say Tabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqin? Did you not why did you not say blessed be Allah, the best of creators? Oh Allah, bless it. You see something, make dua for it. Say mashallah, and say mashallah, right? Say mashallah, tabarakallah. That's beautiful, but that's beautiful by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, right? Versus just saying, oh wow, look at this, look at that. Say mashallah, that's amazing. You're getting married, man. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, that's amazing. So happy for you. As opposed to just saying, oh great. Right, and so it is a particularity that we have as Muslims, again taking everything back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then look at the next line that Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, he says, وَمَا أُغْنِي عَنْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ شَيْئًا. And I cannot avail you against the decree of Allah. So he says, he tells them to take precautions, enter by different gates, but then at the same time he says, but at the same time, Allah's qadr, it will come to pass. You know, you take your precautions, you be careful, but then ultimately what Allah wants to happen is going to happen, right? In al-hukmu illa lillah, and upon the decision is only for Allah. Allah is ultimately in control of all things. On Him I put my trust, and on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let those who want to be dependent on something be dependent upon Him, right? Rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they're very important lessons, right, for us as far as relates to our everyday affairs and how we see things, how we do things. Then Allah tells us, and when they entered from where their father had ordered them, now they went to Egypt, they entered the city, they went in split up. It did not avail them against Allah at all, except it was a need within the soul of Yaqub, which he satisfied. What does that mean? What does that mean, actually? A question for you. What does that mean? It did not avail them against Allah at all, except a need within the soul of Yaqub, which he satisfied. Based on what we just said, what does that mean?
It didn't do much except to give Yaqub alayhi salam a peace of mind.
Right. So Allah's plan was carried out, and a believer has to do, has to put their trust in Allah, has to take precautionary measures. But if somebody has to do something, you have to do it. And if there's a negative consequence, there's a negative consequence. That's what Allah has subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, right? And it's important. And what does that mean? And what does that do? That means as Muslims, we don't get saddened and troubled by things that, things that are meant to happen, they happen. And if we put our trust in Allah from the beginning, and we understand that our capacities are limited, if we understand that, we only have control of so many things, and we say, Ya Allah, we ask your protection, we seek your help, but when things don't go the way we want them to go, we say, Ya Allah, this is what you wanted, and I'm okay with that, right? So being connected with Allah at all times is so important. And then the ayah says, and indeed he was a possessor of knowledge because of what we had taught him. Yaqub alayhi salam, he had this knowledge. He has this knowledge of how he is supposed to interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, but most of the people do not know. But most of the people do not know. Those that don't have Iman, that don't have Islam, they don't take this course of action of putting their trust in Allah, and then being relegated. Man, I watch, I like survival shows, right? I like nature shows. But what's so disappointing, even when you watch those shows, it's like people who are supposedly in tune with nature, and they do outdoor activities and stuff like that, but sometimes those shows are so troubling, because some people on every other word is bleeped out, because they're just constantly cursing, which means they're not connected to the creator of the world around them. They're people who just have this, they don't know, they don't understand the full picture. They don't put their full trust in Allah. When something goes wrong on their survival trip, the only thing that they can think to do is to just say, to curse and to cuss, as opposed to saying, man, subhanallah, that was tough, man. Ya Allah, this is tough. Or no, it's a complete different mentality, right? So our mentality as Muslims, it has to be built in a completely different way. And so those are some lessons that we take from some of this reading. I was going to cover the next section, but subhanAllah, there's a lot to be learned from these verses. And it's really important, that some of this stuff is so applicable, man. It's the story of Yusuf is this fantastic story, but the lessons derived from it, we have to live them. These about what we talked about today, as far as uh, uh, being connected with Allah, asking Him for His protection when we go into different affairs, not overexposing ourselves to and not constantly wanting to be seen by the world. It's not about that. Don't get caught up in that. Don't get uh, eaten up by that world of celebrity, of status, of being seen, of being looked at. And the more that people are on these social platforms, the more you get drawn into all of that, because again, it speaks to those evil inclinations in the self that just want to be like acknowledged and known in this. But ultimately, at the end, that does nothing but ruin a person's internal like goodness, wanting to always be seen by people. It's not a good quality. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, teach us that which benefits us and benefit from what we learn. And may He increase us in knowledge and righteous action. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Any last thoughts before we wrap up? Close out.
And it's interesting, maybe this will be covered later on, but it's interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places verse 68 where it is placed, because there's more to the story in terms of what happens after they've entered. So just reflecting on that, maybe something to cover next, when in fact, what happens to Benjamin. And so it's just interesting to me that it's placed here versus later in terms of a lesson.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. Yeah, let's reflect on that next time, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. All right, guys.